My name is Matthew Hayward. I'm the Outreach Director at the Freedom Foundation in Olympia. The Freedom Foundation recently released several reports that have been making widespread louder. The Freedom Foundation has recently released several reports that have been making the rounds in the news media. If you haven't heard about them, you've probably heard reports about them. But before we get into that, I want to talk about an earlier report that the Freedom Foundation put out. On May 5th, Governor Jay Inslee announced the formation of 3 Safe Start advisory groups to help guide the gradual reopening of Washington State. 2 days later, Inslee disabled the bipartisan Business Recovery Task Force composed of 8 state lawmakers. So who are these people on these Stay Safe Start advisory groups? At least 19 of the 27 advisory group members have either personally donated to Inslee's campaign or their employer has, while others have contributed regularly to the Democratic and left-leaning candidates but have not contributed directly to Inslee's campaign. But it's not political, right? We are told policy decisions about COVID-19 are data-driven. Opening up business is dependent on the data. That our liberties are at the mercy of data. The Freedom Foundation has always been a data-driven organization. We have also always been an advocate of individual liberty and free markets. After our liberties were put on the chopping block, we decided to look into the data provided by the Washington State Department of Health. This data did not come from Pluto, like the governor suggested. It came from his offices. 828 COVID-19 deaths were reported as of May 8th. 681, or 82%, included COVID-19 in one of their causes of death on the death certificate, while 41, or 5%, did not list COVID-19 as the cause of death, but did indicate it was a significant contributing factor. 106, or 13% of the deaths involved persons who had previously tested positive for COVID-19, but had nowhere on their death certificate either cause or contributing cause of death being COVID-19, but they are included in the death total for COVID-19 in Washington State that the governor is using. So 681 plus 41 would be 722, not 828. Math is not hard, Jay. We followed up on this report and recently got some responses from the Washington State Department of Health. So here are 4 things you need to know. This is coming from the Washington State Department of Health. The Department of Health includes deaths of all persons tested positive for COVID-19 in their totals, even if the victims died from other causes, such as the, quote, less than 5 gunshot victims, unquote. 2, over time, the Department of Health will be updating and removing deaths unrelated to COVID-19 from their dashboard. They probably aren't going to make any big announcements about that. The Department of Health really doesn't know how many deaths are due to COVID-19. They admitted this and said that it could take up to a year before they have accurate numbers. But it's all about the data, right, Jay? Washington Department of Health will likely begin counting probable case of COVID-19s in its infection and death counts, non-tested. So the call to action, if you're tired of Jay Inslee, you're tired of the loss of our liberties and the people who are supporting Jay in Washington, you look at the funding that's supporting their campaigns, and it's consistently coming from public sector unions. What we do at the Freedom Foundation is research on public sector unions and where the funding is going. Jay Inslee's top contributors come from public sector union donations. If you, a family member, or anyone you know works for the state, the county, the city, a school, you name it, and they're paying union dues, you know where that money's going. It's going into Jay Inslee's re-election campaign. That's a choice. No one has to pay those dues. So my call to action is to all of you to reach out to people you know, family members, friends, neighbors, anyone you know that works for a public sector that is unionized, let them know they don't have to continue funding Jay Inslee's re-election campaign. Thank you.
Yeah.